Welcome, everybody. I am Jeff Duden, and we are on the Homefront. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Homefront Brands, simply building the world's most responsible franchise platform, encouraging entrepreneurs to take action to transform their lives, impact communities, and enhance the lives of those they care the most about, all the while delivering enterprise-level solutions to local business owners out there on the Homefront where it counts. So if this sounds like you, check us out today at homefrontbrands.com and start your next chapter of greatness, building your dynasty on the Homefront. I will be right here looking for you. And today I am excited and thrilled to have an incredible entrepreneur with us, Ryan Margolin. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity and I'm looking forward to having a chat.
So am I. So am I. So Ryan is the CEO of Professional Hair Labs. He is a digital marketing and branding expert, a serial entrepreneur, and a full-time husband and father of three. He owns and operates several companies in distribution, wholesale, retail, and e-commerce that do between 6 and 8 figures a year each. As the CEO of Professional Hair Labs, he has built one of the world's leading manufacturers and suppliers of adhesive, cleansers, shampoos, scalp treatments, and skincare for the hair replacement industry. Ryan set out on a journey to help create a world-leading product in cosmetic bonding when his mother was poisoned by the harmful chemicals in the hair adhesive products commonly used in the industry. Inspired to keep the same thing from happening to anybody else, his family dove into the research and created their first hair care product free from harmful substances. So much to unpack here. I've consumed a lot of your content online. You've got a great TED Talk that was 19 minutes of just solid gold and nuggets. A lot of stuff around decision, which was really interesting because my book, Discernment, is the business athlete's regimen for a great life through better decisions. So all of that resonated with me. What I'd like to do first is just to get to know you a little bit. Would you care to share a little bit about how you grew up, your background?
My background, I was born in the States, New Jersey, to be exact. Spent a couple of years there and ultimately moved down to Florida. I lived there till I was about 14. And at that point, then I moved to Ireland, where my mother was born. Her and my father owned hair replacement businesses in the United States. And when she got sick from chemical poisoning, she took early retirement. My dad sold the businesses, which led us down, the journey we're on today. But ultimately, we ended up moving to Ireland when I was 14 and I finished school. Traveled for a bit, big into music, big into sport. And then I kind of decided, when I met my wife, it was time to focus in and build some stuff. So like really in really simple circumstances, the opportunity of how I started working with the company happened. It was 2009. It was the economic crash. The industry I was working in was hit first. It was, I was selling wood floors, tiles, sanitary ware. I had been thinking about doing my own thing for some time. A lot of my background was in sales and marketing. It's the only jobs I ever really had. And I didn't have any qualifications. I didn't, after I finished school, I spent more time traveling and kind of learning about life than I did about studying. When this crash happened, it kind of provided the ample opportunity to start to look at other options. Within looking at those options, my dad called me up and, through talking with him, he was like, look, I have my business here. It's not going as well as I'd like it to. I'm not really happy with the way it is. It's a bit stagnant. And, maybe there's an opportunity where you can come over and apply some of your logic to see what can happen. It was myself and my wife, and we had one daughter at the time. And we said, you know what, no, we'll focus on what we're doing here. But then in hindsight, we reflected over a few weeks and we said, you know what, look, maybe it's not such a bad idea. I mean, look, let's commit to it for a year and see what comes out of it. Worst case scenario, we tried it and it didn't work. And, we learned from it. Best case scenario is that something may come out of it. So that's what we did in 2009. It was, I think it was April 2009, we moved to the States. So jumped into my dad's business and kind of just started to get to work straight away. I wanted to consume everything. There was only 3 of them at the time. The business was doing, 250, 275K per year. My dad had innovated, and created this really good water-based solution based upon the previous experience of my mother. He was trying to just show people that there was a different way. So I started to learn about the operations. I started learning about the products, sales, marketing, and broke it into, 3 really simple pillars, which was, the operations, sales, and then marketing. So we focused on all those. And in alignment, I spent about 6 months in that process of learning about the business. But in alignment with that, I manually started building a Excel database through Google, because the scrapers weren't really prevalent then, of all the hair replacement studios in the United States. And I started to see the areas where there was clusters, where there was some, where there was less of them. And I got a really good, understanding of the marketplace. And that taught me probably more than anything. So put a proposal together, served it to my dad and the person working for him at the time, and basically said, look, I need 12K. Well, it was 10K or 12K to, redevelop the website and, rebrand everything. I want to strip everything back and let's build this up again. Because the one thing I noticed was that my dad had this really core, awesome base formula for an adhesion product, but it didn't have the two properties that really would make it exceptional, which was water and oil resistance. Fortunately, opportunity aligned that there was this company who had made an ingredient which provided just that for adhesive products. So we started to explore and reformulate, and everything just came together in this, beautiful period of a few months where we launched the product then at the end of 2009. What we did is we took the database that I had built, and there was about 5,000 hair replacement studios, and there was only really 3 of us that were actively working at that time. So we said, look, if we send out all 5,000 of these, it's probably going to inundate us with calls. We won't be able to handle them. So we split it up into 3 sections, and we did a direct mail campaign. We went old school on it. It was a simple postcard, front and back. The front had the product, the benefits. The back had testimonials from 2 key industry figures. And from the moment we sent it out, about a week later, we started to get phone calls. They were like, oh, we have to try this. They'll order 1 bottle. Those 1 bottles ended up turning into 3, 5, 10, 25 bottles. And before you know it, wholesale distribution. And we had started to really validate the product in the marketplace. So we realized we could then take a look at, international scope for this product. And that's when, at the end of 2010, we had some discussions, myself and my wife, and we decided, look, USA is not really where we want to be right now. So we moved back to Ireland, and I put another business proposal together, and I got an investment of 100K to open up operations in Ireland. And that's kind of where the journey started on this side. So over the space of those next, from 2011 onwards, the next 5 years, we started to hit periods of decent growth. But in about 2015, we started hitting exponential growth to the point where between 2015 and 2019, we added probably close to $8 million to the bottom line on the company year on year. That kind of led us to figure out that we have these really strong principles and methodologies inside of our business. And they actually were created from a point of personal experience of my mother getting chemical poisoning. Why aren't we looking at bringing these same principles and methodologies into the wider range of cosmetics? So we ended up shifting into the manufacturing space, because at this time we didn't have the capacity or the ability to manufacture our products. We owned the formulas, but we were contracting them. And with that came a whole ton of other problems as well as we started to scale. So we took control of everything.
Right.
We dumped everything we had into the business. It's kind of the approach that we take, is that you set the foundations right. You can actually take a lot of pressure and a lot of weight on those supports as you start to grow and hit those pain points. So that's really been my journey, kind of at a bird's eye level. There's so many lessons in between and experience that I've gained, just from my own situations, but also, with my mentors and working with people. I've had really good sounding boards, but have also chosen very wisely of who I tend to lend my ears to make sure that I'm not getting wrong information, because I've learned in the past that, you let the wrong person into your head or into your ears, it'll set you back years.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Well, what an incredible story, man. I'd like to unpack just a couple of things, if you don't mind.
Of course.
You really started, so your dad calls you, you take a flyer, you move with your daughter over to the States, and intuitively, when people build businesses, there's a couple of things. I learned this from a McKinsey consultant. He said, when we look at a business, the first thing we ask is, who is the customer? Like, really, who is the customer exactly? What is the problem that we solve, and who do we solve it for? The second thing is, what's the size of the market? And then the third thing, which is really interesting that a lot of people don't ask, is who's the natural owner for this business? Meaning, if you're gonna build a business, and you should be mindful of the marketplace and who might buy the business, because it might inform your decision making. If you're too broad and you compete with everybody, then it makes it harder to find the perfect fit for somebody to buy the business down the road. How did you know? like you needed to sit down for 6 months and build a database of 5,000 people manually, painstakingly. And then who was on that list? So we can really understand the landscape of the market.
Yeah, so it was only non-surgical hair replacement studios, and you have to remember that was the only knowledge I had of this coming into it. So naturally, my focus.
Okay, so is that a wig? I mean, are we talking wigs
Yeah,
here?
yeah, individuals who experience hair loss through hereditary means or health issues
Okay,
that
hair pieces.
are hair pieces. Yeah, and
Got it.
more commonly now they're called hair systems because they
Okay.
become so advanced that look, it's really difficult to tell when a good one is placed on the scalp. So that's where it really had started. That was the industry my mother and my father had been in for years prior to that. But what I did realize very quickly is that the application of this product didn't only solely lie with individuals who were wearing hair systems for hair loss. They also had actually a wider range of use in just the general marketplace for individuals who wore wigs to, just to change their look on a daily basis. And that's really where the explosion happened, because we started to serve a market that already existed, but they just didn't have the product that they knew they needed. It wasn't available because everything was chemical based. Because look, industry is deemed too small for the FDA to govern. So manufacturers got away with literally murder. You know what I mean? People getting sick from the chemicals absorbing into the skin.
Oh, like crazy glue on the head.
Well, that was I could say unfortunate,
like
but like if you put crazy glue on your head, it's your own fault. You know what I mean? That's the way to look at it. That's your own issue.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I remember that guy was hanging from the beam with the helmet on, with the crazy glue, but you don't need that kind of adhesion.
No, you don't. You need a water-based solution that will allow some flexibility, because when you need to remove it, which you ultimately will, it has to be soluble in some capacity to make it easier to remove. So you have to be able to remove it with either some sort of a cleanser or with water. And this is all part of the evolution of the industry. It's creating adhesive technology that will allow some sort of easy removal without using any astringents or solvents on the skin.
Yeah. So when you have a hair system, is this something that gets removed on a daily basis, or does it stay on for a week at a time? Is it like contact lenses? Like,
if you're wearing a hair system for hair loss, usually you'd like to aim for no less than 2 to 4 weeks. 4 weeks being the absolute max. There are individuals that take it off every week because they worry about hygiene. But what you have to remember is that once the area is clean and it's cleaned well and sanitized and it's prepped correctly, once you seal that unit on, I mean, if you're wearing a polyurethane base on it, there's nothing that's going to get in or out of that. It's not breathable, so it's locked down tight.
So then your product would be reapplied monthly.
Exactly.
And then you moved to, and then you said, well, we got to go back to Ireland, and then you raised $100,000. Yeah. Now, was this a business that was affiliated with your father's business, or was it competitive? Was it to the business? Was it similar, but subtle, but significantly different?
Well, what we wanted to do, so you see at that time, so my intent moving, before we moved over, was to start something, right? But naturally, over the 6 months that I learned about the business, I realized there's an opportunity there. So, look, I had no ownership or anything in that part of the company. That was my father solely. So what I did with the business plan was I presented, to get the investment from him, because we had tripled revenue in 18 months. It was like we did a really good job with that. So we took 100,000 of that and reinvested it to open, and I took a percentage of ownership in that company. When I moved to Ireland and we opened the facility here, it shifted my whole mindset to someone who now truly ultimately was 100% accountable to yourself, not to anyone else. So it was either you were going to do it or no one was going to do it for you. And I think that was the kind of big lesson for me at that point, is like, I had no more, sitting beside me support. Everyone was focused on me to perform because the money had been spent and they wanted return on that money. So I didn't have long. I was so overly confident because, we had tripled revenue in 18 months. Sorry, we had tripled the revenue of the company. So I was like, I'm just going to take the same processes and I'm going to roll them out over in Europe. And it was like, great, man. No, not so great. First 6 months fell flat in its face. So that was the part where I really had to start to knuckle down and look at myself as an individual to improve myself and my mindset and the way I looked at things, and the way I kind of had to shift myself from looking for the opportunities in the failure rather than accepting failure for what it is. And like, well, if I can't make it happen, it's not possible. It's like, no, it's always possible. You just haven't tried enough,
What did you learn about the European marketplace that was different, and what adjustments did you have to make?
So the way companies and people do business in Europe is much different. My experience in the hair replacement industry when I was in the US was very transactional. People were busy, they didn't have time, they wanted to know how you could solve their problem, and they're willing to pay you for it. In Europe, it was a little bit different. They wanted to get to know you, your values, the company values, you as a person, the company, and the ability to supply. It wasn't just about you've got a product and I'm going to buy it. It was about, okay, well, how can we build an actual relationship? And that was a big shift for me. So, and I realized then the language barrier was another thing. We did a show in Germany 2 months after we opened. Spend money in a big room, displays, products everywhere. Not a single person spoke English, and only very fortunately there was a woman there who was able to speak English, and she actually stayed with us the whole weekend and saved our skin.
Look, all you have to do is speak slower and louder
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and do a lot with your hands, and they'll understand.
yeah. Well, listen. If you didn't have products there to actually show them how it's being used, I
Uh,
don't even want to know what they'd be thinking of you. You know what I mean?
no, they would have no idea
Yeah, yeah,
what you were doing
yeah.
there.
But I remember it was funny because my dad actually came to me. It came to me at one of the shows, and I remember him. He was standing in front of this German couple, and he was just speaking to them in English. And I was looking out of the corner of my eye, and I was looking. I know 100% they don't have a clue what he is saying, and they were very polite, and they just stood there. I had to pull them to the side, but he I don't know what he did in this moment of absolute madness. We had this product that was food grade, and he got carried away with himself, and he wanted to show him how beautiful it was, and he sprayed it in his mouth. And the face he pulled, I would never wish on anyone to be standing in front.
And that was an adhesive?
No, no, it was actually an odor elimination spray, which we still have in our line, but he just
Okay.
completely lost the run of himself, and it smells great, tastes horrible. It's not meant for consumption,
Uh,
but he sprayed it in his mouth for some
yeah.
reason, and so I think they got a good bit of entertainment out of that.
Well, let's just identify that you took action, and the devil's always in the details. But until you go out and you make that mistake, the faster that you can make the mistakes in your business, the faster you can iterate, the more learning that you can have.
Yes.
I see people that are much too slow
Yeah.
in going out and getting out of their office, getting out of the house, going to a trade show, calling everybody in the industry, asking for
Yeah.
help. I've seen very experienced, successful, I'm talking billionaire business owners. And when they decide to enter a new market, they literally gather information and they hold three different opposing theses in their head. And then they ask question after question after question to anybody that will talk. And they just spend 4 to 6
Yeah.
months really just understanding everything about the business. Because when you start making decisions against an industry that you don't fully understand, that's when mistakes get more expensive. You can either invest the time and money up front to learn everything about it, or you can just go out and start making expensive mistakes. And if you've got all the money in the world, okay, fine, it's not going to hurt you. But most entrepreneurs don't.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. At that level, mistakes become expensive. They don't become a product of just lost time, which is an expense in itself, but they actually come physically expensive. When you're starting something really small in an industry that, either whether it's competitive or not, you still want to understand somewhat the industry as a whole. But when you're dealing on that level, you can't afford to actually just go into it blind. And that's why they do it that way. And that's why it works.
Ryan, I built a business for 25 years that ultimately I sold, and I started with three partners. We started in Central Florida, and then I moved up by myself to the Carolinas and started our second location. And very quickly, our location in the Carolinas became the thought leader. It became the revenue leader. It became the innovator. It became the technical expertise in terms of business technology and also technology in the field. The other location just stayed kind of where it was in terms of revenue. There was some infighting. Eventually, partners started leaving the business and getting bought out. It was a constant state of bickering. And I wonder if there's a parallel in your story where you started this business in Ireland.
Mhm.
Dad's business was stuck around $250,000. You went over there and tripled it. Then you moved back to Ireland, and now you start crushing it over here and figuring things out. Was there a point where you and your dad had to renegotiate or recontract your relationship around the business?
Gosh, this conversation would take hours. I know, no, look, I mean, this is, I think this is really where the learning comes in, for, whether it's myself or whether it's people listening to this. You'll only be as valuable to someone as comfortable as you make them feel. And when they start to get uncomfortable, that's when you start to see the control seeping in and the paranoia and the uncertainty. And then look, at the same thing happened with me and my father. At no point was the US operation less profitable than the EU one. But what we were doing in Europe was running in parallel to service the US. Like I was handling, sales and marketing for the US for many years, being over here as a director of the EU operations while I was actually growing this one as well. But what started to happen was, as we started to go past, the 6 to 7 figures in Europe, I could start to see a lot of that paranoia coming, creeping in. It's like, it's almost like when someone's not sitting in front of you, you question whether they're working or not. But the proof is in the results, not in what you see. If you're seeing growth, someone's doing something. It's not just happening by itself. Touching on that subject, yeah, there were many, many instances. And going back even to my TED Talk, one of the key ones that shifted everything for me was being handed a non-compete by my own dad. You know what I mean? So that changed everything for me. That was the moment where I was prepared, to walk away from everything because I didn't want to be a part of an operation on a familial level that would have that sort of paranoia or that control.
Can I unpack that moment
Yeah.
for a minute? Because I've made that mistake.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, was there a conversation before the piece of paper was handed?
Oh yeah, and it wasn't even a conversation. It was all the little innuendos and the little underhanded, behaviors. And human behavior tells you a lot about people. And when you get used to reading people, you start to see some behaviors. Like for example, I know in this case, my dad started to become very distant and separate, not only from me and the communication, but from the business as well. And I know that when that happens, I've learned over the years something's going on. So I expected something. And, so he came to Ireland and, we sat down, and over that kitchen table, he gave me that piece of paper, and I read it and I flipped it back over to him and told him, not a hope, not happening. And I said, you can fire me, you can buy me out, you can do whatever you want. I'll even walk away from it all. But one thing I won't stand for is the lack of trust and belief that, what I'm doing here is actually for the benefit of everyone. Because look, my brothers were involved in the business at that point as well, and they were over in Florida. So it was a really hairy time. But I tell you, the truth of the matter is, what I realized was that every single piece of the problem in that equation lied with my father. I had to just do work on myself to make sure that I wasn't emotionally reacting. And that's the point where I learned very quickly that, look, there's nobody who's made an emotional decision that has made the right one in my eyes. It's usually your mind always has to be stronger than your feelings, because when you can remove the emotion from it and be logical about it, you can start to explore the avenues and come up with a solution. It's not about avoiding the problem or dodging a bullet. It's about finding the solution that ultimately is going to keep the wheels on track and keep things moving forward. The ego in you wants to stick up your middle finger and say, forget it, I'm leaving, and that's it, I don't need you. But then the other side, the logical side, is like, no, there's a lot to do here. And just because someone is having a little issue here on the right and they're deciding to project it in a way that's quite volatile, that doesn't necessarily mean this has to be where it all falls apart.
So your father leaves, goes back to the States. You're sitting there by yourself. Maybe you sought the counsel of your wife or a friend or somebody. But now you've got the opportunity for an inflection point. You've got the opportunity to make a different decision for tomorrow than you've been making in the past. How did you work through that process? And then ultimately, what changes did you make moving forward?
Obviously, yes, the first sounding board is always my wife. Look, I mean, she is very blunt, but she's good for me. She is the one that, when I don't want to hear it, that's exactly what I'm going to hear.
Keeps us humble, brother. Keeps us humble.
And you know what? I think it stands to anyone. If you have a partner that truly wants the best for you, they will hold you accountable, and they will do it in a manner that's very fair. And they'll look. I mean, but that comes with growth as well. What changed from that point was that I no longer cared what people thought anymore in terms of like how they viewed me or my work or my ethic or what I did. I just got on with my business, and if they had a problem with it, that was their problem. I was no longer the person who was going to defend my position. And naturally, what happened was not too long after that, there was another big fork in the road where things didn't really go too well for me mentally, and I had to back away for a couple of months. And the real, true, I suppose, weight that was on the company, which was ultimately on my shoulders, wasn't handled by the people who needed to handle it. So that there was a lesson in that, I think, for everyone. And I think you look, as humans, we need that. We need those moments that challenge us. And no matter how strong you are, we're still human, and things happen. It's not about being embarrassed by it or about accepting defeat and just staying on the ground. It's about allowing yourself to just sit within it for a little while and just figure it out. Why is this happening to me? I'm not supposed to be feeling weak, or I'm not supposed to be feeling vulnerable. I mean, I deal with way heavier stuff on a daily basis, but this particular issue is consuming me, and I need to figure out why.
Nobody's immune to the pressure.
No.
As we grow, though, and business owners, and we just get hit with so much, you do learn how to realize that none of it's fatal.
Yes.
And that not everybody's going to like every outcome. There is a dollar on the table, and people would like as much of it as possible.
Yes.
What's interesting is, though, how I observe different business owners think about that differently. Is it absolute dollars and I have to win in every transaction? Is it I want to find a way where everybody wins? Or I've seen some people where they want to be in a deal where everybody loses, and they don't feel good until everybody's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And what I talk to my kids about, and I've learned a lot of this recently, is the first thing I try to understand about somebody is how they make their money.
Yes.
Because if you don't understand, are they a transactional player? Are they looking to make money in every transaction? Do they build businesses quick to move them? Are they long-term builders that want to build with people, and are, like all the nuances of how people make their money will give you an indication of how they're likely to react.
Yeah.
And as long as I know what to expect from people, and as long as I know where people stand, I'm usually okay with it, because what I've learned is that not everybody has the same business building ethos as I do. They don't look at it the same. We're all wired differently. We have different degrees of empathy, different degrees of competitiveness, different degrees of things that matter most to us. Those are the things that drive our decisions. People that weren't like me, I would say, well, I don't trust them, but I've actually redefined my entire view of trust. I try to understand how people make their money, what matters the most to them, what their value set is, and then I trust them to be consistent with that.
Yes.
And they don't have to be a mirror image of the way I think for me to trust them.
Yeah.
But but they have to be consistent to who they are. Now, if you tell me one thing and do something completely different the moment, then I don't trust you.
But and this is it. But I think there's wisdom and experience in that, because at the end of the day, it's very difficult for someone, like the moment someone feels uncomfortable with something because it goes against the grain of what they would normally do, they get uncomfortable, and that's where the problems happen. But actually, through experience, as you said, you learn to see there's different ways that people operate, and it doesn't necessarily mean it won't work. It's just you have to manage those expectations and allow that process to